Chapter 38. Everything goes well for a little bit.
This might be a weird question, Jamie said, but have you ever considered decorating a real tree?
Brand gave him a look as if the question really had been unreasonable. He glanced up at the halfway constructed Snuggle tree and then held up the wooden shield he was painting.
What would we do with these then? He asked.
Jamie nodded slowly.
I guess you have a point, he said.
Hilda turned her shield around. It was covered in dark brown and purple, with no specific pattern or motive, though the streaks reminded Jamie ominously of blood splatter. She grinned.
What do you think?
Artistic, Jamie said. Hilda got up and walked over to Astrid. Astrid was, with so much enthusiasm Jamie almost didn't recognize her, constructing the Snuggle tree with the help of her mother Likely and Stormfly. Jamie, Brand, Hilda, Andis, and a few other kids sat nearby painting the tree's decoration. Hilda handed Astrid the shield, and Astrid jumped onto Stormfly, who flew up so that Astrid could hammer the shield onto the green planks. It was a lovely tradition. Jamie liked it, but he also couldn't help but miss Christmas, even if it was, in his mind, still months too early to celebrate it.
What are you painting?
Andis asked, looking over his shoulder.
What are those? Fishing hooks?
Candy canes, Jamie mumbled, looking at his artwork with some dismay. Painting them just reminded him how long it had been since he tasted anything sweet.
It's a kind of food that we have back home.
Andis made a face.
Looks poisonous.
Jamie had gotten sick from eating too many candy canes before, so he guessed she wasn't too far off.
Jamie
turned around to see Hiccup walking towards them, the limp in his step just a little more prominent than it used to be. Jamie pretended not to notice, and instead frowned at what Hiccup was holding in his hand.
Here,
he said, handing Jamie a horned helmet.
Thought you should have this. I would need somewhere to put your presents.
Jamie put the shield down and gingerly took the helmet from him. It felt as if he was holding history, though it had yet to become that. He looked up at Hiccup.
Odin delivers the presents?
Was the first thing he thought to ask.
As opposed to who?
Hiccup asked with a small laugh, probably at the way Jamie's mouth hung open. Jamie didn't know how to answer that. Instead, he hugged Hiccup around his chest before putting the helmet on his head.
This is so cool,
he said, grinning up at him.
Thank you so much.
Hiccup's eyes shifted bashfully.
No problem,
he said.
I was actually wondering if I could talk to you for a moment, privately.
Brand, Andis, and Hilda were all following their conversation. None of them were very good at hiding the suspicion in their eyes. Jamie hadn't told them exactly how much Hiccup knew, but they knew he knew something.
Sure,
Jamie said, giving the trio a hard look before turning to Hiccup again.
What's up?
They walked around the tree, and Hiccup checked the surroundings as if he was expecting to be followed.
I was just... Not that I don't trust you, he started.
I haven't told him anything, Jamie said. Hiccup blinked.
You haven't?
He asked.
But why? I'd say things would be a lot easier if you just told him, though.
Jamie interrupted again and couldn't help feeling a bit smug from how bewildered Hiccup looked.
I won't say anything, so you don't have to worry about that. It's your problem, not mine.
It's my problem, all right, Hiccup muttered. He hesitated for a moment, looking at his legs.
But you know him best, and I could tell him. I'm just worried that it'll make things worse. Either it'll be awkward or it won't, but if not, it might cause more problems. He already doesn't want to...
He cut himself off, glancing at Jamie. Jamie knew how that sentence would have ended. He shrugged, averting his eyes.
To be honest, he said, I think you know him as well as I do at this point, and I don't know anything about that stuff, but I think no matter how he reacts, Jack would rather know than not know. He's been so twitchy lately, Hiccup murmured. Like, it's just hanging in the air.
Jamie resisted the urge to shake his head mournfully.
How about a mistletoe? He asked with a cheeky grin. That way you can just blame it on the mistletoe if it goes wrong.
Hiccup sent him a confused look.
Blame it on the mistletoe? He repeated. Oh, don't you have that tradition? Like the mistletoe that killed the god Baldur?
They stared at each other. Why are you guys talking about mistletoe? Both Hiccup and Jamie nearly leapt off the ground in surprise. Jack had appeared behind Jamie, and Jamie realized it evidently wasn't very strategic to have a secret conversation where someone could just hide around the corner of a fake tree. But Jack didn't seem like he'd been eavesdropping. He was currently hunched over laughing.
"I am not sure," Hiccup said, sharing a nervous look with Jamie. "Where did you come from?"
"Astrid told me you were here," Jack said, wiping a tear from his eye. Hiccup narrowed his eyes.
"Astrid,"
he muttered, as if revealing their whereabouts was a deadly offense.
"I just thought Jamie might want a helmet for Snuggle Talk. It's my old one. Odin doesn't really leave presents for me anymore anyway."
"Odin?" Jack repeated, his expression a mixture between confusion and dismay.
"Both of you," Hiccup laughed. "Why the surprise?"
Jack probably came up with some vague reply, but just then Jamie saw Andes's hair poke up from around the corner of the tree. He leaned past Jack and saw the three of them huddled together, spying on them. When Andes met Jamie's eyes, she put a finger to her lips. Jamie tried to subtly tell them with his eyes to scram, but it wasn't easy to go under the radar when Jack stood right in front of him. He saw the daggers in Jamie's eyes and turned around. "Oh, hello," he said, a question in his voice. "What's up?"
"Just hanging up shields," Brand said, at the same time as Andes said, "What's up with you?"
Jack blinked.
"I should get back to painting shields," Jamie quickly said, and started ushering his friends away. "It's Snuggle Talk. Lots to do. Talk to you later."
He pushed his friends back to their shields and glowered at them.
"Subtlety isn't your forte, is it?" he whispered. "We were doing okay before you busted us,"
Hildur muttered back. Jamie glanced back up and saw Jack and Hiccup heading towards the Great Hall. Jack looked back over his shoulder as if sensing Jamie's eyes on him, and Jamie smiled in a way he hoped didn't make him look like a criminal. If Jack had any suspicions, he didn't show it.
"What was that you said about mistletoe?" Hildur asked. "How long were you listening?" Jamie asked accusingly. "You hang it in doorways and stuff. If two people stand under it, they have to kiss."
Brand made a face. "Yucky." Jamie shrugged. He had to agree. Andes was suspiciously quiet about her thoughts on the matter. The great hall was a whirlwind of warm colors, the smell of food and mead, zestful voices and booming laughter. Hiccup put his hands on his hips, looking over it with satisfaction. "I think we outdid ourselves this year, Astrid," he said. Astrid beamed beside him. "And I thought I had to do it without you," she said, then shook her head when Hiccup's smile faltered a little. She hugged him quickly, with one arm since she was carrying a tray of yaknog in the other. "Happy Snuggle Talk, Hiccup." She pulled back and quirked a brow at Hiccup's all but untouched tankard. "Aren't you going to drink?" "Oh, yeah, I will," Hiccup said, and looked around for an escape route. "I was just, thinking of drinking it with Jack. He's sitting over there, by himself." Astrid followed his gaze and frowned. "He looks kind of forlorn," she mused. "Why isn't he with Jamie?" Hiccup could swear he'd seen Jamie only moments ago. He scanned the great hall and instead spotted Andes tying something that looked suspiciously like mistletoe to one of the pillars. Then he spotted Jamie standing nearby, dragging his hands over his face. "He must be busy," he concluded. "You should talk to him," Astrid said. There was a glint in her eyes. "Astrid," Hiccup complained, "this isn't the right time." "Isn't it, though?" Astrid countered, grinning. "The great hall, people dancing, a little mead in your bellies. This is as romantic as Burke can be." Hiccup cringed. "Shut up," he whispered. "What? It's not going to hear us from here." Astrid looked expectantly at him, but her face softened when Hiccup didn't say anything. "Hiccup," she said, every ounce of mischief gone from her voice. "If he really is leaving at some point, you better tell him before it's too late. I know you. It'll only hurt more if you don't." "Didn't take you for a love expert," Hiccup muttered. Astrid just raised her brows, and he sighed. "You're right, of course. It's just scary." "Scarier than the things we've done?" Astrid asked. "Much scarier." Astrid laughed. She took a tankard off her tray and held it out to him. "Tell him it's from me," she said. "A peace offering." Hiccup reluctantly took the tankard. "A peace offering?" Astrid nodded optimistically. Hiccup smiled. "Thank you," he said. "He'll love it." Jack was sitting by the end of a table, twisting his staff idly while his eyes stared off into the air. He jolted slightly when Hiccup put the tankard in front of him and sat down beside him. When he saw who it was, his face lit up in a way that made Hiccup's chest twist. "What's this?" "Yaknog," Hiccup said. "Astrid wanted you to have it." "Oh, right," Jack said, looking relieved. He took a sip of the yaknog and hunched over like he was going to spit it right out again. He forced it down and sent Hiccup a wide-eyed look. Is she trying to poison me? Hiccup burst out laughing. Then he quickly cleared his throat and shook his head.
No, he said in a shaky voice. Just smile and pretend. She means well.
Jack sent him a narrow look. You told me it was good, he said.
I said you should give it a try, Hiccup replied easily. I never said anything about the taste.
He caught Astrid's eyes from the other end of the hall and sent her a thumbs up. She beamed back. You hooligans are barbaric, Jack muttered with a small laugh.
It's in the name, really,
Hiccup said, and raised the tankard to the sky before taking a minuscule sip. He suppressed a shudder and cleared his throat.
So, aside from Astrid's Snuggle talk blessings, are you having a good time?
Jack started twisting his staff again.
Yes,
he said. It's great. Just taking a small break from the crowd. I keep spacing out and bumping into people. It's getting embarrassing. He bit his lip, his gaze fixing on something behind Hiccup. Hiccup turned around to see Likely arm wrestling with Hork the Haggard. I've just realized something, Jack said, and Hiccup turned back to him. He was still looking at Likely, a faint wrinkle between his eyebrows. I've seen my friends back home and people I've met throughout my entire stay here. Not just on Berg, but the entire archipelago. Astrid's mom, she reminds me so much of North. Maybe especially now. And then Gothi reminds me somewhat of Sandy because of her silence and the way she seems wise in a kind of funny way. He smiled, looking down at the tankard now. And I saw Bunny and Rune, though he liked Bunny's jumpiness. And then Alva. She reminded me of Tooth. Her enthusiasm, Jack laughed softly, and warmth, eagerness to help. She was a lot like Tooth. The mention of Alva made Hiccup shift nervously.
You must miss them,
he said. Jack looked almost sorry about it, and Hiccup just shook his head.
Of course you miss them,
he said. Well, Jack said, so quietly Hiccup almost didn't hear him. I'll miss you just as much. Hiccup looked at Jack's hand, the one that was resting on the table next to his tankard. He wondered if he should grab it. Would that be too much? Compared to how close they'd been when they were drinking, it was nothing. But they were in a room full of people now. Maybe not. But he had to do something.
There's actually a thing I've been wondering about.
Hiccup started, ignoring the furious way his heart was pumping.
Something that happened at Alva's. I thought I might have misunderstood, but I've been wanting to ask.
Great start, Hiccup, truly. I think I might know, Jack said, staring intently at his tankard. His face seemed paler. He bit his lip again and took a deep breath. I'm sorry. I should have told you long ago, but I was scared.
What are you lads sitting here alone moping for?
Came Gobber's sudden voice, appearing behind Hiccup and Jack.
It's Snuggle talk. Oh, is that Astrid Jack knock? Good luck with that.
He cackled and sat down opposite of them, putting down a tankard full of something else on the table. His cheeks were somewhat pink, but that was the least colorful part of his appearance right now. As always, he was decked out for Snuggle talk. Hiccup sent Gobber a dark look, if only because he knew Gobber wouldn't pick up on it anyway.
Hi, Gobber, he said flatly. We were just having a conversation.
Gobber squinted at him.
Need a bucket? You look a bit sick.
Gobber, Jack said, his previous nervousness replaced with a bright smile. You believe in trolls, right? Where did that come from?
Aye,
Gobber said gravely.
They steal your socks, but only the left ones, we know,
Hiccup said.
Ah, you don't believe me, do you?
Gobber challenged. Hiccup opened his mouth to argue, but then closed it contemplatively.
It's not that I don't believe you, he said. It's just the whole sock-stealing part that throws me off.
Jack sent him a private smile before turning to Gobber again. I believe you, he said. I'm just wondering why you believe it. Have you seen anything weird around here? Hiccup sent Jack a look that said, What are you doing? Jack did not reply.
Hiccup you should be able to tell ya,
Gobber said, surprising them both.
Wise little lad he was. Knew that there was more than animals and dragons hiding out in the deep, dark woods.
What are you talking about? Hiccup asked. Gobber looked at him as if he was the one talking nonsense.
Don't you remember? You came running out of the woods, rambling about some sort of gnomes living underground, he said, chuckling as he looked into the air and reminisced. You couldn't have been more than 4. Stoic always berated you for looking for those tiny creatures.
Tried to tell you it was all just silly fantasies, but you wouldn't let it go. You were fully convinced of what you'd seen. Aye, but eventually the dragon issue became more challenging, and you became fixated on that. Hiccup stared at him. A faint memory was stirring.
I thought that was a dream, he said.
Gobber shrugged. That's what everyone told you.
But what happened to the gnomes?
Hiccup asked without thinking.
Are they still here?
Now you believe me? Gobber asked with a loud laugh. I don't know. Far as I know, you only saw them once. Maybe they moved because you found their hiding place. Hiccup was so lost in his attempt to recall the memory, he almost didn't notice Jack looking at him.
What?
It seemed Jack hadn't noticed either. He smiled slowly.
That's why you can sense it, he said.
It was always there, deep in your memories. Gobber sent them both a frown, but then the singing from the center of the room suddenly spiked, and he shot up from his seat. Come on now, he cheered, and all but danced around the table, grabbing both Hiccup's and Jack's arms. No much sitting in the gloom. It's Snuggle talk. They didn't have much choice but to follow. Hiccup supposed he didn't mind the excuse to leave the yak-knock behind. That, and he also didn't mind the excuse of being forced to dance with Jack and the rest of the village, but they kept finding their way back to each other. It wasn't until what felt like hours later, when the colorful decorations swirling around them with the near-constant spinning of the circle dance almost made Hiccup throw up, that he hobbled away from the chaos. His leg ached. Hiccup decided not to check if the fairy's curse had spread any more, though when his leg suddenly buckled under his weight and he had to catch himself against a pillar, he thought it might be time to stop dancing for the night. He pushed hair out of his face. He was sweaty and woozy enough to wonder if Astrid had put something extra in the yak-knock. Not that he'd had enough of that to make a difference. He looked up when he noticed someone coming towards him and wasn't too surprised when he saw it was Jack. Jack glanced at his leg before sending him a questioning look.
You okay?
He asked. At least that's what Hiccup thought he'd said, but his voice drowned in the furious singing and stomping. Hiccup nodded.
Just taking a break, he replied.
Jack obviously didn't hear him either, because he stepped closer to him, leaning against the pillar as well.
This is somehow even more intense than after the battle, he said into Hiccup's ear. When is Odin coming with our gifts, exactly?
Hiccup laughed.
He's been here already, I think, he said. We'll see when we get home.
Jack was quiet. Hiccup turned to him to see him craning his neck, trying to spot something in the crowd.
Why is Jamie waving at us to go away? He asked.
Hiccup spotted him as well, and sure enough, Jamie was sitting with his friends, frantically gesturing while Anders and Bran tried holding him down, shrieking with laughter. Jack looked up.
Oh, that doesn't translate, I don't think.
Hiccup looked up as well. One of Anders' mistletoes was hanging above them.
What the... is this some kind of a prank, somehow? He asked uncertainly. He was talking about mistletoes earlier.
Jack gave him a strange look.
Oh, right, he said. Could I ask why? I'm not sure. It was random. The mistletoe killed Baldur.
That's random, Jack countered. He had a pinched look on his face, his eyes starting from Jamie to the mistletoe, then back at Hiccup. He smiled sheepishly.
Don't worry about it. Just a prank, as you said. Let's go somewhere else.
Hiccup didn't understand, but something told him that might be a good thing. Judging by Jack's embarrassed reaction, he had suspicion he might not be ready to understand just yet. Jack kept a wary eye on Jamie as they trudged through the forest. 5 days had gone by since Snuggle Talk, which was the day Jamie had been gifted the sword he was currently wielding and swinging idly as he walked, defeating invisible enemies. The sword was Hiccup's handiwork, of course, though he insisted it was from Odin, forged in the Hall of the Gods. It was perfect for Jamie's size, and Jack would never be the one to confiscate a cool sword, no matter how sharp and dangerous it was. The only problem was that Hiccup, though a tad more timid than the rest of his tribe, was still a hairy hooligan, and thus saw no problem with giving an 11-year-old a super-sharp blade. Which left Jack to be the mom friend. The world was turning upside down. But Jamie was so happy to finally have his own sword, it was all worth it, of course. Hopefully no one was going to get stabbed on accident.
Where's Rough and Tough? Jamie muttered. They said they wanted to come with us today, didn't they?
Jack glanced over his shoulder as if he would spot the twins spying on them from the bushes again.
Maybe they'll meet us there, he said.
But if they don't, it might be for the best. They started questioning me the other day about how my powers work. Something about the looks they had. I'm not sure if that was such a good idea."
"Why do you keep just telling them things?" Jamie asked. "It's Rough Nut and Tough Nut. Who knows what ideas they'll come up with?"
Jack shrugged feebly. "It's just relieving to tell the truth, I guess," he mumbled. "Exhausting to keep it all in around Hiccup." Jamie sent him a long look. "I know," Jack mumbled. "Don't say it." Jamie said it.
"Just tell him. I'm almost 100% sure it'll be fine."
"Almost." Jack didn't reply. They climbed a steep slope, and the cliff Jack had channeled lightning on came into view. They walked the rest of the way in silence, stopping near the edge of the cliff. The twins were still nowhere in sight. "I've been thinking about something," Jack said. "Maybe it would be better to let him figure it out on his own. Maybe it'll soften the blow. Like you said, I have been dropping hints, and it sort of feels like he's getting it." Jamie pursed his lips.
"You think he knows already?"
"Don't you?" Jack asked back. "Judging by the way he acts around me sometimes."
"Yes, but maybe it's something else,"
Jamie said. He wasn't fully meeting Jack's eyes now. Jack searched his expression. What else could it be? Jack opened his mouth, then shrugged and smiled sheepishly.
"I don't know. It's just that people can be a bit dense sometimes. Sometimes people need it spoon-fed to them, you know?"
"Hiccup isn't dense," Jack mumbled, but suddenly didn't feel so sure anymore. He held onto his staff with both hands, twisting it in the snow. Maybe he knows, but he's waiting for me to admit it. Maybe he's trying to soften the blow for me."
"Yeah, there sure are a lot of maybes,"
Jamie mused, staring at his blade. He met Jack's eyes in the distorted reflection, his brows furrowing.
"The weather's not been too nice lately. I've heard people talking about devastating winter. They think it'll be here soon."
Jack had heard them too. According to what Astrid had told them, and it felt so long ago now, it was a bit early, but that didn't surprise him. "Yeah, I need to be ready," he muttered.
"That too," Jamie said. "But if you do, Hiccup won't have time to figure it out. You're changing, Jack. Just treat it like ripping off a Band-Aid. It's now or never."
He paused, and when he looked up at Jack, his steadfastness was replaced with uncertainty.
"Don't you think?"
They'd let themselves enjoy the 5 days following Snuggle talk, but Jamie seemed to grow more and more anxious each day. It might have something to do with Snuggle talk, how it reminded them of Christmas, or the imminent threat of the Snow Queen, or just the general feeling that they'd been away from home too long. Or maybe it had something to do with the small cracks that found their way into Jamie's voice sometimes. Jack refused to have that conversation with him, but they both knew Jack wasn't the only one who was changing. And as funny as that was, it was just another reminder that time was passing, and it was passing fast. "You're right," Jack said. He steeled himself, sending his staff a hard look. "Okay, I'll tell him tonight. It's now or never." Jamie's face lit up.
"I'll hang out with Brand and the others then, so that you two can—"
His eyes suddenly widened, fixing on something over Jack's shoulder.
"Duck!"
Jack didn't even have time to turn around to see before he was yanked off the ground by a pair of talons. He shrieked a protest, Jamie rapidly becoming smaller below him, and hit his kidnapper with a staff. Then he heard laughter, and he looked up. "I thought you weren't scared of heights," Rough Nut jeered, hanging upside down from Bar's neck. "How's training going?" "Summon any more lightning?" Tough Nut asked hopefully.
"What are you doing?" Jack snapped. "Put me down."
"That sounds like a no," Tough Nut said disappointedly. "Well, not to worry, friend, because we have a plan." "That's very nice, but I'd like to keep being alive," Jack said. "Whatever it is your genius minds have cooked up, I don't think you fully grasp how my powers work anyway." Rough Nut snorted. "We know all we need to know," she said. "You said you could fly, right?" Jack stared at her upside-down face.
"Not anymore,"
he protested. "And your powers usually activate in life or death situations?" Tough Nut asked.
"I've tried this before," Jack shrieked, "and I don't even know if the life or death thing is accurate."
"Only one way to find out," Rough Nut said with a wicked grin. "Now!" And then Jack was tossed upwards. He soared towards the clouds for a few seconds before he changed course. Sure, he was used to being in the air, so even in this unfortunate situation he had the ability to think clearly. The downside of this was that there was no way to save himself, so the only thought in his head was, "This isn't good." Gravity took a hold of him, and he shouted curses at the twins as he plunged down.
"Wind!" he cried. "Very nice things you did back there with Hiccup, but could you do me another favor?" He waited. "It's a time-sensitive question."
He could barely hear his own voice, and he was spinning so wildly it was hard to pinpoint which way was up and which was down. The ocean came in glimpses below him, getting closer each time he saw it. He clutched his staff, closing his eyes. Focus, focus, focus. Nothing happened. He opened his eyes again, and panic abruptly set in. He was about to scream, but then something grabbed his leg and pulled him out of his freefall. The course changed yet again, sloping back up into the sky.
"What did I tell you?"
Jack barked.
"You brain dead."
He stopped yelling when he managed to look up and saw a dragon that definitely wasn't Barf and Belch. It had only one head and looked a lot more elegant, even from this unfortunate angle. Astrid's head peeked over the Stormfly's neck, smiling down at him.
"What was that?"
she asked, but looked behind herself before Jack had a chance to reply.
"Don't worry, you'll get him back soon."
Jack could faintly hear the shouts of Roughnut and Toughnut far behind them, but they were quickly fading away. Stormfly shot through the air much faster than Barf and Belch could fly, even almost as fast as Toothless. Or maybe he just felt it was faster because he was being kidnapped.
"Astrid," Jack yelled. "I was sort of in the middle of something." "I could see that," Astrid replied. "What did you do to make the twins do something like that?"
Jack groaned and let his body go limp, swaying back and forth to the beat of Stormfly's wings. He couldn't see nor hear the twins, so he supposed Astrid had lost them. She steered them downwards and landed somewhere in the forest where the growth was so thick it was hard to see the sky. It was a bit concerning. Astrid jumped down from Stormfly and stroked her.
"Good girl,"
she cooed. Then she turned to Jack, her expression cooling a little. She snorted.
"All right. You don't have to look so scared. I come in peace."
"Of course," Jack said, looking around. "I mean, the reasons for why you would bring me deep into the forest where nobody else will hear us are plentiful."
"Gods, no wonder why Hiccup likes you," she said.
She nodded at him to walk with her.
"The cliff is this way. I just thought we should have a little talk."
Jack didn't think he had much choice but to follow. On the bright side, Astrid didn't seem to be in a bad mood. Still, her dragon was walking right behind them, and though Stormfly was, as Astrid had just said, a good girl, it still made Jack feel like his best chance was to behave.
"Talk," he repeated.
"All right.
The weather's been a bit grim lately."
Astrid sent him an unimpressed look.
"Okay, let me do the talking then," she said.
She looked ahead, keeping her chin raised, but Jack could see the way her hands twitched.
"I guess I should have done this earlier, but I just wanted to apologize for threatening you with an axe and all. I could have handled that situation better."
Like the twins, she seemed uncomfortable with apologizing. Maybe it was a cultural thing. But the fact that she did it anyway lifted Jack's spirits.
"That's all right," Jack said. "I knew you wouldn't actually do anything. You were just scared."
Astrid made a face.
"I wish you were more unpleasant to be around," she muttered. "It would make distrusting you a lot easier."
"Sorry. Thank you?"
She didn't reply, but her mouth twitched upwards. "I guess you'll also say that you understand why I distrust you, won't you?" she asked dryly, but her face still fell when Jack nodded. She sighed. "Thing is, there's a part of me that does trust you. I want to trust you. But this village, we've gone through a lot. Trust doesn't come easy to us."
Though she obviously made an effort to sound unbothered, Jack could tell she was genuinely apologetic. He nodded, looking ahead as well.
"Should take a few notes on that," he mumbled.
"It comes a little too easy to me."
"Did you talk to Hiccup? About your secrets?"
Jack turned sharply to her. She was looking at him now, searching his expression.
"He told me you have them," she said. "Secrets. And he told me you'd given him the go-ahead to tell me. But he didn't tell me anything. He felt like they were your secrets to tell."
Jack couldn't quite hide the way his shoulders sunk with relief.
"I see," he said. "So now you want to hear them from me?"
Astrid shrugged.
"If it helps me understand what you were doing out there, then yes," she said. "Sure, I'm curious too, but in the end I don't really care about your secrets. I only care about our safety. Hiccup's safety."
She paused, sending Jack a peculiar look, as if she'd spotted a speck of dirt on his forehead.
"He gets reckless trying to help the people he cares about. And he cares about you. A lot. I don't want to stop him from helping you.
Not that I ever could, but at the very least I want to know the stakes. Jack felt a bit ill. He averted his eyes. The stakes are high, he said quietly. Hiccup knows the danger he's putting himself in. I couldn't stop him either, but whatever happens to him, I'll make sure he's okay in the end. I'll make sure that everyone's okay. He could feel Astrid stare on him. Are you saying we're in danger? She asked. I thought you were just trying to get home. We are, Jack said, but I got into trouble with someone along the way. Someone who doesn't like me. But what does that have to do with us? Jack opened his mouth, then closed it again. Astrid was asking all the right questions, but Jack doubted she'd believe him if he told her outright. She'd just think he was hiding the real truth from her. Look, This is why I'm trying to find a way back home, Jack said. When I'm gone, she won't be a threat anymore. Things will go back the way they were. It would be like Jamie and I were never here. Astrid stopped walking. Jack was a couple of meters in front of her before he noticed, and he turned around to see her giving him a hard look. What about Hiccup? She asked. Jack blinked. What about Hiccup? Astrid kept staring at him as if he just asked an incredibly stupid question. Will you come back? She asked. I thought you wanted me to leave, Jack said. It's not about me, Astrid said. Will you come back? Jack almost took a step backwards at her accusatory tone. No, it wouldn't be possible, he replied in a smaller voice. Jack, Astrid said, shaking her head in disbelief. I get that you need to go home, but there has to be a way to at least visit sometimes. Look, I know I haven't exactly been hospitable lately, but I want to believe that you are our friend. I wouldn't like it if you disappeared. Hiccup, she trailed off for a moment like she was weighing her words. You really don't know how much you mean to him, do you? Jack expected her words to feel like lead in his chest. Instead, they felt like searing coal. Astrid, I don't have a choice, he snapped. Trust me, I've gone through this in my head again and again, and I keep going through it, hoping to somehow find a different solution, but there is none. My first priority is Jamie, and it always will be Jamie. I'm getting him home, and I wish with all my heart that there was a way I could do that while staying here myself, but I can't. I know I can't. Astrid opened her mouth, but it was like she'd broken a dam. She wanted the truth, and Jack felt almost desperate to tell her now. You think I mean a lot to Hiccup? I'm afraid that if Hiccup looked inside my head and realized how much he means to me, it would scare him off. Honestly, it's comical. I've known him for just a few months, and still the thought of losing him makes me feel like... He trailed off, struggling to find a comparison that accurately described the burning in his chest. He groaned, turning away from Astrid, and ran a hand through his hair. I have a duty back home that I can't leave behind. I have a family that I want to see again. A whole world that I wanted so long to be a part of. So long. And yet a part of me wants to let it all go, if it meant I could stay here with him. But I can't. Something cold landed on the hand that was holding his staff. He looked up. It had started to snow. Jack, Astrid said, her voice softer now. Jack heard her footsteps, and then her hand on his shoulder, gently turning him around. Maybe we can help you. If he told us everything, we could find a way together. Jack knew his eyes were rimmed with tears. He was already starting to regret spilling all of that to her, but he pulled his lips into a smile anyway. Thank you, he said, though he knew it was impossible. Maybe we can. I was planning to talk to Hiccup later today anyway. Tell him the rest of my story. I only hope he won't hate him, fear him, be disgusted by him. Jack swallowed dryly. I just hope he'll still like me. Astrid looked at him with something between pity and amusement. Have you ever had a girlfriend, Jack? She asked. Jack blinked. What? A girlfriend. Heard of the concept? You know, a partner? Holding hands? Sharing a bed? Kissing? No, I haven't. Why are you... He stopped talking, glancing at her hand on his shoulders. Astrid started to laugh, pulling her hand away. That's not why I asked, she said. You just seem a bit lost, is all. You're so young and naive. She shook her head solemnly as she started to walk again, leaving Jack to stare at the back of her head. Why are you acting so weird right now? Jack demanded, catching up to her.
Oh, I'm acting weird? How the tables have turned.
Astrid sent him a knowing smile, as if they were in on a secret together, but Jack couldn't for the life of him figure out what it was.
It was just a question, Jack. Friendly conversation, you know? But I should actually get going.
She turned to Stormfly, walking around to the saddle.
Training session with the Dragon Rider initiates. A lot of them can't shut up about you, you know?
Jack couldn't help but smile. Really? Astrid smiled back, then seemed to hesitate.
I feel it in my heart that you're a good person, Jack, she said. I'm just waiting for something to confirm it. But even the best liar wouldn't be able to fake the affection you hold for Hiccup. And I get it.
Her smile turned a bit sad.
I like him too. I know you only want what's best for him. And he only wants what's best for you. Whatever it is you have to tell him later, I don't think anything could make him hate you. He's in too deep for that.
Jack searched her eyes. Why did it feel like she was speaking in codes?
In too deep?
He repeated. Astrid rolled her eyes.
Yeah, good luck with that,
she said, then climbed onto Stormfly's back.
The cliff is right up that way. Once you've talked to Hiccup, I'd like to hear it as well, if that's okay with you. Then we can figure out how to help you.
Jack didn't know what to say, but the silence was so heavy he had to say something.
Okay,
was what he came up with.
Thank you,
he then added, looking down at his feet.
Sure, I have no real reason to hide it from you anymore. I wonder what makes you sound so sad when you say that.
Jack looked up at her, but her expression was unreadable.
See you later, she said,
then patted Stormfly's neck.
Come on, girl.
Jack stood still as he watched them disappear over the treetops. Snowflakes fell into his face. He stood there for a couple of minutes, mentally going through the conversation, before shaking his head and heading the way she had pointed. After a few minutes, he thought he recognized the paths, and he tried heading towards the smell of the sea, though on Berg that smell generally came from every direction. After a little while, he heard Jamie's voice, and he followed that instead. But as he came closer, he realized Jamie wasn't just talking. Something was not right. His voice came in bursts, as if he was shouting or screaming.
"Jamie?"
Jack called, speeding up. He didn't get a reply, but he kept hearing Jamie's echoing voice. He couldn't hear the twins. Maybe Jamie had gone looking for Jack after Astrid took him.
"Jamie!"
The voice got louder, and Jack could hear it clearly now. He was screaming, calling for help. Jack set into a sprint. But then he halted. This was wrong, wasn't it? Jamie's voice continued to cry for help, but it didn't sound entirely right, somehow. Something Jack couldn't quite place. A certain pitch in his voice or a helplessness that didn't go together with the craftiness Jack had come to associate with Jamie. Unless, of course, he really was in danger. Jack had a bad feeling, but it didn't matter. Trap or not, he had to be sure. Jack gripped his staff tightly. Then he dropped it on the path. He hurried towards the sound of Jamie's voice. It led him deeper and deeper into the forest, and the further he got, the more suspicious Jack felt. If the Snow Queen was waiting for him in the woods, what could he do? He didn't have Babytooth to alert the others. He didn't have his staff, and even if he had, would he be able to use his powers? And would they stand a chance against her? The mermaid said he had to get his powers back before the Snow Queen came to Berg. Was he too late? He spotted Jamie. He was curled up in between the roots of a huge tree with his back to Jack, completely quiet and completely still. Jack tried keeping his head cool as he walked over to him.
"Jamie?" he whispered. "Is that you?"
Jamie didn't respond. Jack crouched by him and put a hand on his shoulder, turning him over. It looked like Jamie, but it looked like a Jamie that had been frozen in a blizzard, dead for hours or days. Jack felt his blood run cold, but he calmly got to his feet. This wasn't Jamie. It was just a sculpture, a cruel joke made to scare him and mock him. And as he watched, the sculpture started to disintegrate, mixing in with the snow on the ground. He turned around to run, but stopped when he almost crashed into a huge white figure. He stumbled back, his hand twitching for the staff he'd left behind. A white copy of Toothless crawled towards him, crouching to pounce. Jack opened his mouth to call for help, but Snow Toothless was faster. The sculpture opened his mouth as if to blast him, but instead of plasma, a beam of white shot out and hit Jack's head. Next thing he knew, he was lying sprawled over the roots. The world was spinning. He tried pushing himself up into a sitting position, but the world lurched sideways, throwing him back down. Snow Toothless's paw stepped into view, and Jack looked up into its empty, ice-blue eyes. He thought he managed to defiantly bare his teeth at it before the world slipped away.